Okay, perfect. Now it's going, right? Okay. So thanks everybody for joining. Really, really excited to have a presentation for you all this morning. As usual, we'll do our presentation, then we'll have whatever news and updates after, because we're continue to live stream this part of the meeting on YouTube so that folks can watch live, or of course it goes straight to a recording that you can share with folks in the future. So that's where we are. I'm really excited to have Natan speak to us this morning on some work related to his thesis, dissertation, on the health of young Black Brazilians and the perspective of necropolitics. You might be wondering, what does that mean? And I'm so excited because Natan is going to tell us. So without further ado, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. I will share my screen with you. Sorry if my voice is not working how expected today, but I will try to do my best to be understandable. It's working?
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay. So, first of all, thank you guys for the opportunity to be here today to talk just a little bit about my theoretical framework for my thesis. I know that I put on the spreadsheet that today I will talk about my thesis project, but
No, go ahead.
But today I talked with João and we saw a necessity to talk just a little bit about my theoretical about my theory or my theoretical framework as well. So today I will introduce you just a little bit because it's deeply thought, the necropolitics, but I will try to do some insights about how does it works and some aspects about the creation of the theory. So my presentation today is to talk about the necropolitics theory, and I divided my presentation into some steps. So I will start to talk just a little bit about the introduction of the theme. I will go ahead with the timeline where I will talk about the background theories, talk just a little bit about the life and history of Akhlid Dembi, the creator of the theory as well, and some main aspects and pillars of the theory. And if I have any time, I intend to talk just a little bit about the thesis project as well.
Okay.
Okay, now, Hamidem says in the Necropolitics book, because they did an essay and a book as well, the necropolitics can be summarized in some way to thought about the death. So, according to him, I put here some thoughts that we can find on the Necropolitics book. And according to him, to exercise sovereignty is to exercise control over mortality and to define life as the deployment and manifestation of power. One could summarize this by saying that sovereignty means the capacity to define who matters and who doesn't, who is disposable and who is not. So, the necropolitics theory, it's so much complex to understand just in an hour, for example, because it's a theory who comes after a lot of thoughts and a lot of philosophers' work started a long time ago. So I selected endpoints and some events and thoughts that was important to the creation of the necropolitics as well. So in the 1648, we have the Treaty of Westphalia, who introduced us the first thoughts about how can a state can control some populations. So in this period, we have the ending of the 30 Years' War and the 8 Years' War as well. It's a conflict and political conflicts between the European potencies And we can observe on this period the concept of state sovereignty, where the state has control over other territories and some populations group. And this kind of event gives us the basis of sovereign power as well. In 1651, we have the Thomas Hobbes doing a metaphor about the Leviathan. So Thomas Hobbes do a metaphor with the state being this Leviathan of the society, because according to the Bible, the Leviathan is a creature of demonstration of power and authority. According to him, the population was founded here in the state of nature, what is marked by a lot of poverty, loneliness, brutality, and brevity of life. So the absolutely sovereign is responsible to ensure the collective security, but the state also have the power to over life and death. So after this point, we have a lot of years between one point and another, because in this period we have the beginning and happening of the Industrial Revolution as well. And after the ending of the first Industrial Revolution, we have some thoughts coming from Marx and Engels. The two philosophers worked a lot analyzing some outcomes of the capitalism into society. So they observed that in that period, we have a start of the exploitation of the worker, because in this period it was very common to commercialize some products, and we also have in this period the transformation of life into a merchandise item. With this, we have an improve on their global reach. And we also have exposure of some populations group to exploitation and some exclusion of dignified conditions of living as well. Now, going to 20s, we have at the beginning the Carl Schmitt with the publication of Political Theology. Here, after the ending of the First World War, we have an analysis done by Carl Schmitt, and according to him, the sovereign is the one who decides on the state of exception. So now we have one of the pillars that compose the Necropolitics later, and according to him, the sovereign power is executed by a way of suspension of rights, and that can be applied to some groups of population as well. According to him as well, the state of exception can be also interpreted how a determination and classification of disposable lives, how like if some groups of population don't have value to another ones. Sometimes it's just a little bit confusion, because any thoughts here were observed by a lot of philosophers. So we have a main aspect introduced before, and with the best of the time, for example, we have another ways to think about the same aspect. In 1951, we have Hannah Arendt introducing us to the concept of origins of totalitarianism. After the Second World War, what ended in the 1945, we have Hannah Arendt doing an analysis and saying that the totalitarian regimes exclude certain groups. And these groups can be considered vulnerable to extreme violence, because they are considered stateless or non-human for the state. So we have here the concept of human superfluity, which is so important to some definitions on the Necropolitics later. And now I do some point here to talk just a little bit about the birth of Akhlem Bembe, the creator of the Necropolitics. So Akhlem Bembe was born in July 3rd in Notale, Cameroon in Central Africa. All of his works is based on the colonialism, social inequality, and political conflicts, like his life was marked by too. In 1970, he did an education in philosophy and history in Africa. In 1980, he postgraduated in political science in France, where he did his doctorate as well in 1989. He worked at some institutions here in the USA, like Princeton, California, and Berkeley. Nowadays, he works at WITS Institute for Social and Economic Research, the Weiser Institute in South Africa. And he also have some affiliation here with the Duke University, and he do an annual visiting here at the John Hope Franklin Humanities Institute. So coming back to our timeline, in 1966, we have the Frantz Fanon with the publication of the book, The Wretched of the Earth. It's important to remember that now we have some thoughts based on race and the outcomes based on the colonialism legacy, because until here we have some thoughts, but none of these are focused mainly on the racial aspects. So Frantz Fanon is a physician who was used to live in Martinica, was born in Martinica, and analyzed the colonialism and colonial violence. He worked at the Second World War, and most of his work was based on analysis of psychological and social effects of the colonialism by the point of view of the colonized and the colonizer as well. So what Frantz Fanon could observe in this work, it's the dehumanization of racial groups during this war. And he pointed us to the violence can be used in some aspects to like a tool of control under the state of the populational groups in some contexts. And in 1976, we have the Michel Foucault with the publication of History of Sexuality. So we have here the introduction of one of the pillars of the Necropolitics, where Eklund Mbembe worked too. And we have the concept of biopower. So according to Michel Foucault, the state have control under some groups of population because the state can do the management of life. Now we don't have the concept of sovereignty, where the state have all of the sovereign here, but the state have now the management of life. And the state can do this, controlling the birth, the health, and the reproduction, because the state have access to all of the places like schools, churches, prisons, and everything like that. So now it's important to mention that we have a transition of the thought. Before here, before the 118, we have the thoughts that the state make, die, or let live. But after that, we have the state being making live and letting some groups to die. And now we have some events in this period in history. They started to analyze how the race can be an influence factor under the health of the population. And we have some events that we have the necropolitics shown more visible than in another contexts. So we have in 1994 the genocide in Rwanda. Rwanda was divided into three main groups, the Hutus, Tutsis, and Twas. And what happened in Rwanda in 1994 can be considered a framework of political power, because the Germans and the Belgians have a lot of interest in this region and the colonization of this region. And they use it a way to create a conflict between this group of populations inside of this society, in this context. So we have the Germans and Belgians giving the power and considering the Tutsis, the 14% group, like the elite of the society in this moment. So the Hutus consider this unfair because the Tutsis is the less percentual group of the society in this moment. And we have the starting of a civil war. So in this period, we also have the media propagating hatred and civil war. getting us a worst scenario. So we have the mass elimination of specific populations because it was very common that we have a lot of crimes, like some deaths committed with using of basic weapons like knives or machetes and anything like that. This period was also marked by a lot of rapes, where we have dissemination of the HIV, and what causes a lot of mortality in this population as well. So an estimative points us that we had something about 800,000 people deaths in Rwanda because of this kind of conflicts. In 1995, or just 1 year later, we have the George Agamben introducing us the Homo Sacer, sovereign power and bare life. This concept was also used in the Necropolitics with another name, but we have the same idea. So according to George Agamben, a person can be killed without it being considered a murder. So according to him, the sovereign power decides who belongs to the legal order and who excluded from it and can be killable, can be killed. And now we have the first publication of Akli Mbembe in La Naissance du Marquis. So Akli Mbembe analyzed the resistance groups to Nazism in France. So he analyzed the power and how can the power can be showed in situations of conflict and violence. So according to Mbembe, the war is not just a military war, but it's also a political war and a cultural war as well. And with the publication of this material, Akli Mbembe anticipates some reflections and which can be considered a basis to the necropolitics theory later. And now in 2003, we have George Agamben again with the defining and consolidation the concept of state of exception. So now we have the normalization of the state of exception and how can be considered that this state of exception can be observed in contemporary contexts. So according to him, in this state of exception, these groups are considered invaluable, and we have the suspension of laws and legal norms exercised by this sovereign power. So this state of exception is not considered a contest in emergence contests like wars and something like that. Now we have the state of exception executed like a permanent norm. Some examples of this state of exception can be considered the concentration camps, the Guantanamo prisons, and war zones, for example. And also, in 2003, we have the Akli Mbembe publishing the essay Necropolitics. So this essay proposes for us the contemporary sovereign power. It's a complement to Foucault's biopower, which is introduced, but now we have some thoughts introducing us the focus on the death, not even in the life. So here we have the definition of dignified and disposable life. Although the author does not make it explicit, forming pillars can be observed when we read the Necropolitics book. And that is these 4 pillars. So we have the biopower introduced by Michel Foucault before, and it refers to the power exercised by modern states over life. But now, for the necropolitics, the power not only regulates life, but also exercises control over death. So the necropolitics radicalizes biopower, highlighting situations in which the state or the authorities decide who has the right to live and who can be sacrificed. Now, the sovereign is the supreme power of a state or ruler over territory and its people, including the ability to legislate, judge, and impose control. But under necropolitical regimes, the sovereign manifests itself through practice of extreme violence, genocide of some groups, massacres, and abandonment as well, creating some groups that we can consider killable populations without any consequences. So the state of exception, introduced by some philosophers like George Agamben, it refers to a situation in which normal laws are suspending, allowing the sovereign to act outside legal norms. But for necropolitics, it has become a permanent norm in many contemporary contexts, especially in colonized or peripheral regions. And the politics of death, introduced by the Akhlame Bembe, and can be considered one of the main pillars of the necropolitics theory. It refers to the strategies and practices that place death at the center of government policies and social control. So the politics of death operates by creating hierarchies between lives that are considered valuable and disposable. It manifests itself in battlefields, war zones, refugee camps, system of mass incarceration, and structural exclusion. It's an inversion of the biopower, because in the biopower we have a focus on life, and now we have a focus on the death. It's complementary, it's not opposite. So it's important to mention all of these contests, all of these concepts. It's a lot more complicated than I'm trying here to show to you, but just to compare, I put this in the table. It's important to, if interest yourselves, to go and find more information about how this can be so complex as well. So we have the biopower introduced by Michel Foucault and George Agamben, with a focus on the life. And now the necropolitics introduces the concept of death. Sovereign could be observed in Westphalia and the Thomas Hobbes concepts, and tell just a little bit about the sovereign power under territories and populations. But for the necropolitics, the states have the power to kill and decide who is disposable. For the state of exception, we have the Carl Schmitt and Hannah Arendt as well, where they say the state can be suspend some laws to deal with temporary emergencies. But now for the necropolitic, we have the normalization of violence and unprotection, transforming zones of exception into everyday practice. And for politic of death, introduced by Akhlame Bembe, we have some strategies and politics used how a tool of control of the population. Okay, and now I put some information here in a chronology, so we can see how some thoughts are introduced according to these years. It's the same information that we have on the previous slide. So after the publication of the essay, we have some analysis doing by how can the necropolitics can be observed in our society. So we have mainly, but not specifically only in this period, but we have some events that can be analyzed by the necropolitics lens. For example, we have the conflict and migration situations. And it's important to mention the situation in Afghanistan, Somalia, and Gaza, where we could see a lot of places living in precarious conditions or displaces, like a result of the global financial crisis of 2018 and the earthquake in Haiti in 2010. We also have the militarization of borders and refugee camps, submitting these populations to survive in these conditions. So we don't have some worries about the conditions of living of this population, and this can be considered as well a state of exception if we talk about it. After the 2010, we also have an analysis done by how the peripheral communities can be considered a state of exception, because here we can observe a lot of deepening social inequalities, and we also have, in the last years, an increase in state violence committed by these group populations. So these people are used to live in precarious living conditions as well, like a result of, for example, the gentrification process and the displacement. And the peripheral communities also can be considered a death zone because we have the population living in that conditions and submitted to precarious conditions in general. So they don't have access to health, they don't have access to education, and a lot of important aspects to live. So after that, I put here my thesis project because I intend to analyze somehow our indicators of health, our markers of health can be used to analyze the necropolitical situation in Brazil. So I will talk just a little bit. I don't have slides for this, but and we are deciding. I have a lot of meetings with João Viçosi as well to define my thesis project. But we intend to do some to create some definition of the necropolitical determinants of health in Brazil, because in Brazil we have a lot of informations of health that can be used to create this context and to analyze how the necropolitics in Brazilian situation can define the health situation as well. We also want to analyze how the hospitalizations and the spatial aspects can exert influence under the situation of health of the young Black people. And we intend to measure the potential years of life lost by the social determinable diseases in Brazil, because in Brazil, in the 2024, we have the creation of the program Mais Brasil, and they intend to eradicate some social determinant diseases. I don't remember right now the name of the 14 diseases, but I remember it's 14. And we're gonna analyze the potential years of life lost by the young Black people population by these diseases. So here I put some information, some references that I use it to construct my presentation. If anyone have any doubt, I will be very pleased to answer. If I don't know the answer as well, because I'm already learning the necropolitics in general and something like that. But I promise I will try to do my best. So thank you for your attention today.
Looks like João added in the comments. For context, we're trying to establish this, I think, even targeted concept of necropolitics or necropolitical determinants of health in contrast to the social determinants of health, assuming the ideological stance of necropolitics in contrast to the general view of social determinants of health. Questions or comments for Natan? I know a lot of the kind of philosophical things are a bit of a departure from what we're used to, but I think it's refreshing to take a different look at things.
It's a lot of information, and I really don't know necropolitics before that I decided to work with it. And it's so hard to understand because it's philosophy.
Yeah.
And we are going to use it to analyze some health data under this kind of theoretical framework as well. But
it's a really interesting framework to think about all of the current human disasters that we're having and sort of displaced populations, refugee populations, how we handle that on a super international environment. So really interesting. I look forward to seeing all of the results and those 14 components and what the results come out for that. Exciting.
Other questions or comments? Anyone online? Anything to add?
anyone have interest, I have the necropolitics in PDF, the essay and the book as well.
Wow.
And I can share with you later.
So if anyone wants to do some heavy reading, they can call it light reading, yeah. Yeah, lots of imagine how you read all those texts. It's so complicated. A lot of German philosophers.
Yeah.
But it has you look at everything that we do differently, right? So that's one thing that I like about it is we have these different vantage points. It gets you to think about a different perspective that's not our own usually.
Right, any other last call, questions or comments? If you have them, please share in the chat or unmute. We're too intimidated by the topic.